privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty.
I think he'll change. He is committed of his own level of service, and that will remain true.
For most of his life, King Charles bore the immense weight of duty, honor, and an inheritance defined by tradition. He lived not as a man free to chart his own path, but as a figure sculpted by royal obligation, waiting in the wings longer than any heir before him. And yet, in one historic moment that no one anticipated, he chose to walk away. Whispers of something unusual brewing at Buckingham Palace began circulating just days before. Courtiers looked uneasy. Royal insiders grew quiet. Then, without warning, the nation, and indeed the world, stood still on a February morning as King Charles delivered a brief, unprecedented address from behind the ornate gates of the palace. "I resign," he said. Two words that carried the power to shake the foundations of Britain's centuries-old monarchy. It was a moment no one saw coming, not the seasoned royal commentators, not the most experienced journalists, not even the most informed government aides. Charles had waited more than 70 years to ascend the throne, the longest wait of any British heir. His entire life had been shaped in the shadow of Queen Elizabeth II, a monarch whose reign redefined grace and longevity. To the public, to his family, to his very identity, being king was the endgame. And yet, after just over a year in power, he relinquished it. Television screens around the globe lit up with the image. King Charles, visibly fatigued but resolute, standing alone before the press. Inside the palace, royal staff were thrown into a state of confusion. Cabinet members received frantic phone calls. Legal experts were summoned to determine constitutional procedures. Nothing like this had happened since the abdication of Edward VIII in 1936, and that was for love, not duty. Crowds swelled outside Buckingham Palace. Some cried, some speculated, some simply stared in stunned silence, phones in hand, faces blank with disbelief. The monarchy, long seen as the one immovable pillar in an ever-changing nation, had just been rocked by a voluntary exit. What could have pushed Charles, who had spent his life preparing for the throne, to abandon it so abruptly? Behind the spectacle lay a deeply human story. From the moment of his birth, Charles had been labeled the future king. His childhood was regimented. While his peers climbed trees and played in the mud, Charles was learning diplomacy, posture, and poise. His days were governed by formality, his interactions monitored, and his emotions subdued. He was born into a role, not a life. As he grew, he watched his mother command global admiration with quiet strength. Queen Elizabeth II was not just his mother, she was the benchmark, the living symbol of duty, fulfilled without falter. No matter how diligently Charles worked, how sincerely he tried, he always stood in her shadow. Public perception rarely allowed him to shine. His personal life offered little reprieve. What began as a fairy tale union with Diana spiraled into heartbreak and global scandal. While Diana became the people's princess, Charles was cast in a harsher light. His efforts at redemption, charitable work, environmental advocacy, and a softer public persona often met with cynicism. Even as king, the ghost of public scrutiny never left him. When he finally ascended the throne at age 73, Charles brought with him a deep sense of responsibility. He didn't seek glory, he sought continuity. Yet the comparisons to his mother intensified. The work was relentless: state papers, public engagements, ceremonial duties. But still, the question lingered. Could he ever truly live up to Elizabeth's legacy? In the end, it wasn't scandal, age, or ill health that drove Charles to step aside. It was the quiet burden of impossible expectations. He knew he would never escape the comparisons, and perhaps he realized that clinging to the throne out of tradition alone would not serve the monarchy or himself. His resignation didn't just send ripples through political circles, it fractured the royal household. Prince William, now unexpectedly thrust into the role of king, wore the shock on his face as cameras captured his arrival at the palace. It was meant to be decades before he would rule. Now, duty had come calling early. Inside the palace, uncertainty reigned. The usual clockwork of royal operations ground to a halt. Events were cancelled, tours postponed. Staff looked to each other for guidance and found none. The monarchy, a byword for continuity, was facing a crisis unlike any in modern memory. The next morning, Buckingham Palace felt eerily subdued. The clinking of teacups, the rustle of official documents, the gentle rhythm of royal life, all replaced by whispers and unease. Advisors and aides huddled behind closed doors. Security personnel tightened protocols. The sense of routine had evaporated. As public speculation spiraled, many wondered whether Charles had acted out of personal suffering or strategic foresight. Was this a man surrendering under the pressure of history, or a king wise enough to know that the institution must evolve? Though Charles stepped down, his statement was not one of weakness, it was one of clarity. The monarchy must always serve its people, he said in his final words as sovereign. And sometimes service means knowing when to step aside. In a world where power is rarely surrendered willingly, his choice was radical. It challenged the monarchy's very image, but perhaps it also renewed its relevance. The future now rests in the hands of King William, and with it, a new chapter begins, not just for the crown, but for the identity of Britain itself. This was not the story many expected from King Charles, but in many ways, it may be the most defining decision of his life. From the moment of her birth, Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana of Cambridge has captivated hearts across the globe, not just by virtue of her royal lineage, but by the charisma and grace she has displayed from her earliest days. One of her very first official photographs, taken by none other than her mother, Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, was shared widely by media outlets around the world. In it, Charlotte is nestled lovingly among her family, offering the public a tender glimpse into the bond she shares with her parents and her older brother, Prince George. In July 2015, Princess Charlotte was christened at the historic St. Mary Magdalene Church in Sandringham, a sacred event filled with both tradition and sentiment. She wore an exquisite lace and satin gown, a replica of the original Victorian christening gown from 1841, an heirloom with profound significance in the royal lineage. Her baptismal ceremony featured water from the River Jordan, a symbol of spiritual origin, and the use of the silver-gilt lily font, a treasured artifact traditionally reserved for royal christenings. From her earliest days at Kensington Palace, Charlotte emerged not merely as a member of the royal family, but as a rising star in her own right. With each public appearance, she radiated charm and a naturally engaging demeanor. The press, and indeed the public, quickly took note of her playful expressions and poised gestures, which began to define her presence at royal events. Whether waving gracefully at crowds or flashing an impish grin at photographers, she infused each moment with youthful joy and royal elegance. As she grew older, her personality began to blossom even further. Charlotte became known for her spirited energy and warm disposition, often stealing the spotlight during formal engagements. Her unique bond with her siblings, Prince George and the youngest, Prince Louis, has frequently been showcased in public outings. Charlotte is often seen taking a nurturing older sister role, gently guiding Prince Louis with endearing care. This natural instinct to protect and lead has only amplified public affection for her. Her growing confidence became especially visible during iconic events like Trooping the Colour, an annual celebration of King Charles III's official birthday. There, Charlotte was frequently spotted smiling, chatting with her family, and waving to the crowd. A particularly unforgettable moment occurred in 2019 when the young princess stuck her tongue out at spectators during a light-hearted interaction. The candid gesture made headlines, serving as a testament to her lively and unfiltered spirit. At just 7 years old, in 2022, Princess Charlotte experienced a significant royal milestone, her first solo outing. She attended the Commonwealth Games alongside her parents, Prince William and Princess Kate, and joined her great-uncle Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, and his wife, Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, with their children. Wearing a neatly striped dress and sporting braided pigtails, Charlotte was a vision of young royalty. Observers noted her obvious delight as she laughed and smiled comfortably among spectators. Her mother, seated beside her, was seen explaining aspects of the competition, a bonding moment that underscored the family's values of inclusion and education. That same year, Charlotte joined her father, Prince William, to issue a heartfelt message of support to the England women's national soccer team ahead of the UEFA Women's Euro 2022 finals against Germany. The video drew praise for her composed delivery and showcased the royal family's evolving engagement with national events. Despite their royal stature, Prince William and Princess Catherine have long made it clear that they wish to raise their children, including Princess Charlotte, in as grounded an environment as possible. Striking a delicate balance between royal duties and childhood joys, they are committed to ensuring that their daughter experiences a childhood filled with normalcy, empathy, and personal growth. These values are evident in Charlotte's demeanor. Raised in a household that exemplifies public service, kindness, and humility, she has grown into a young royal who understands the weight and meaning of her role. As she matures, the responsibilities that accompany her position will inevitably evolve, but the foundation being laid today is clearly one of service, compassion, and quiet strength. Education naturally plays a pivotal role in preparing her for that future. Unlike many children her age, Charlotte's academic path has been deliberately and thoughtfully curated. Royals don't just attend any school, their institutions are selected with extreme care, taking into account both tradition and the demands of modern leadership. At just 2 years old, in early 2018, Charlotte began attending Wilcox Nursery School, a prestigious early education institution housed within a church hall just a stone's throw from Kensington Palace. Her parents chose Wilcox not only for its proximity, but for its philosophy, a blend of structured learning and play, encouraging early literacy and numeracy in a gentle, low-pressure environment. Wilcox is known for its nurturing approach and dedicated staff, characteristics that were especially attractive to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Tuition fees at the nursery ran between £3,500 to £4,073 per term, amounting to around £9,150 for the academic year, approximately $11,200 a day. Charlotte made headlines for her stylish burgundy wool coat paired with stone-colored tights, red shoes, and a red bow, a look both regal and adorable. After completing her time at nursery school, Charlotte transitioned to Thomas's Battersea in London, a well-respected co-educational preparatory school located not far from Kensington Palace. Her older brother, Prince George, also attended Thomas's, which educates children between the ages of 4 and 13. The school emphasizes values like kindness, empathy, and resilience, qualities her parents are keen to instill. When Charlotte arrived at Thomas's in September 2019, she was just 4 years old. Accompanied by her parents and brother, the little princess wore her new navy blue uniform with a neat ponytail and a shy smile. Unlike her usual self-assured demeanor, she appeared slightly nervous, clutching her mother's hand and occasionally retreating behind her. Her father later confirmed that Charlotte was very excited about her first day, and the slight hesitation was merely a case of first-day jitters. At school, she was referred to as Charlotte Cambridge, a decision made by her parents to offer her and her siblings a sense of normalcy. That small yet deliberate choice reflects their broader approach, raising future leaders who are grounded, approachable, and deeply aware of the world beyond palace walls. Thomas's has served as a cornerstone in Charlotte's early education, fostering not only her intellectual development, but also her social and emotional growth. Teachers and staff alike have noted her confidence and her natural ability to connect with peers. While she may carry the expectations of centuries of royal tradition on her small shoulders, Charlotte's upbringing appears to be striking the right balance between preparation and play. Looking ahead, it's inevitable that Princess Charlotte's role within the royal family will continue to expand. She represents a new generation, one that is expected to merge tradition with progress, protocol with personal authenticity. With her innate charm, steady guidance from her family, and a thoughtfully constructed educational path, she is poised to be a key figure in the monarchy's future. And while royal titles and ceremonies will always be a part of her life, what stands out most today is the little girl who waves confidently at the crowd, who shares a special giggle with her brothers, who listens attentively as her mother whispers in her ear. Princess Charlotte is more than a symbol of continuity. She is, in many ways, a hopeful glimpse into the monarchy's evolution. As we follow her journey, one thing is clear. This young royal, with a heart full of kindness and a future full of promise, is just getting started. Behind closed doors, palace staff who had witnessed decades of royal transitions found this moment unsettling. It wasn't just quiet, it was the kind of silence that descends when trust within a family begins to unravel. Prince William arrived at dawn, his face unreadable as security cameras captured him stepping from his vehicle. Minutes later, Catherine joined him. Usually a model of composure in public, she too appeared visibly shaken. They secluded themselves in the East Wing, while royal aides waited anxiously in the hall, stacks of urgent paperwork accumulating. The weight that had burdened Charles for decades now fell abruptly onto William's shoulders. At 43, he had envisioned many more years before the crown would pass to him. His life had been meticulously orchestrated, a careful balancing act of royal duty and fatherhood. But overnight, everything changed. William had made it a point to be a hands-on father, prioritizing school drop-offs and soccer games. But the crown would now demand his full attention. His children would see him more on television than at the dinner table. Across the ocean in California, Prince Harry received the news over breakfast. His phone buzzed not with messages from family, but from reporters scrambling for a quote. The emotional distance between him and the family had long been vast. Now it felt unbridgeable. If he spoke, critics would accuse him of opportunism. If he remained silent, they would say he abandoned his family in crisis. His silence, though, said more than any statement could. The once inseparable brothers now lived in entirely different worlds. William had no choice but to act. He cancelled all personal obligations. While Harry observed in silence from afar, the weight of kingship settled on William like a cloak he hadn't asked to wear. Outside Buckingham Palace, Londoners gathered in stunned silence, then voiced their diverging opinions. Some thanked Charles for his honesty, others insisted duty should never take a back seat to personal choice. For many, the monarchy had long been a beacon of continuity. Now, that symbol seemed fractured. Queen Camilla moved through the halls quietly, evading the press. Having spent years enduring public scrutiny to remain by Charles's side, she now found herself in a grey area, no longer just a consort, but not fully sovereign. She had no historical script to follow. Later that day, Princess Anne arrived by helicopter. Stern-faced, she bypassed reporters. As the only senior royal with military experience, her silent show of support for William was unmissable. The British monarchy, an institution that had endured for over 1,000 years, found itself at a precipice. Could it withstand a voluntary abdication without unraveling? Or was this the beginning of the end, an era of modernity or decline? The following morning, the country woke up changed. The golden crown at the Tower of London sat untouched, gleaming behind bulletproof glass. Yet, the monarchy it represented had irrevocably shifted. Inside Windsor Castle, portraits of former monarchs stared down from centuries-old walls. For the first time, their lineage faced an interruption, not due to scandal or war, but by choice. The time-honored belief that a monarch served until death had been upended. The pressing question was no longer who would wear the crown, but whether the crown still mattered at all. In Parliament, hushed conversations unfolded. Though largely symbolic, the monarchy held immense cultural weight. If a king could simply walk away, what did that mean for national stability? At universities, students engaged in passionate debates. Could a medieval institution still serve a modern society? Many viewed Charles's resignation as proof that the monarchy no longer fit contemporary values. Despite the uncertainty, defenders of the crown remained. Tourism officials cited its economic benefits. Community leaders saw its potential to unify a fractured nation. But even supporters agreed, if the monarchy hoped to survive, it had to evolve. For 12 hours, Buckingham Palace's social media accounts went dark. When they returned, it was with carefully curated photos of William meeting the public, a visual declaration of continuity. The monarchy stood at a crossroads. Would it adapt to a rapidly changing world or become a relic of history? All eyes turned to one man, the heir who never expected to inherit so soon. Prince William wandered the quiet corridors of Kensington Palace, feeling more like a man in a dream than a monarch in waiting. The soft carpet muted his footsteps as he passed by portraits of kings who took the crown with a sense of destiny. None had inherited it as he did, by abdication rather than by death. His journey was meant to be gradual, a slow ascent to eventual kingship. Instead, he was thrust into the spotlight overnight. In the royal nursery, his 3 children began sensing the shift. Prince George, only 11, now bore a heavier weight. His days of carefree play were giving way to responsibility. He was no longer just a prince, he was next in line. William, who had done everything to give his children a semblance of normalcy, now watched that reality dissolve. His father's resignation didn't just alter his future, it reshaped his entire family's path. Even his appearance began to change. The jeans and sweaters he favored were quietly replaced by tailored suits and crisp collars. The boy who lost his mother in the public eye had grown into a father now grappling with the full gravity of kingship. He had not sought the crown, but it had found him all the same. Around the clock, cataloguing artifacts, letters, and personal items from Charles's brief reign, curators debated how to frame his story. Was he a transitional figure, a cautionary tale, or a visionary who dared to step down before duty consumed him? In a climate where every monarch before him had clung to power until their final breath, Charles's resignation was being interpreted not as failure, but as a redefinition of what power truly means. Historians combed through his speeches, noting a shift in tone over time, from passionate environmental crusader to a more measured and at times melancholic voice. Some remarked that perhaps Charles had always been more comfortable as a prince, a thinker, a philosopher, a man of causes, rather than a ruler boxed in by centuries of rigid royal expectation. In the court of public opinion, views remained sharply divided. For some, his choice to step down was an act of profound self-awareness and humility. For others, it was an abdication of responsibility, a break in the contract between monarch and nation. Yet, the discourse was undeniable. People were talking about the monarchy in a way they hadn't in decades, not as a distant institution of pomp and pageantry, but as something vulnerable, human, and remarkably modern. In art galleries, Charles's likeness began to change. Paintings that had been commissioned in the early months of his reign now took on a different tone. Some were completed as they were, showing him in ceremonial robes, the orb and scepter in hand, symbols of power he had willingly surrendered. Others were left unfinished, like a monarch whose story was still unfolding. In Westminster, lawmakers considered the constitutional implications. Could a voluntary abdication lead to future instability? Should there be legal language inserted into succession laws that addressed such possibilities? Committees were quietly formed, white papers drafted. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but the precedent had been set. What if, in 50 years, another monarch felt the same urge to walk away? Meanwhile, William faced the daunting task of stabilizing a shaken institution while remaining true to his identity. His wife, Catherine, remained his quiet anchor. With the public's trust largely behind them, they focused on continuity, honoring tradition without letting it trap them. Together, they visited communities, charities, and councils, reassuring a country hungry for reassurance. Their presence, calm and composed, offered a balm to the public wound. William's first major speech as king was neither overly emotional nor too formal. It struck a tone that echoed his mother's warmth and his father's sincerity. He acknowledged the moment's weight, thanked his father for his years of service, and emphasized the future, not just of the monarchy, but of the people it aimed to serve. Internationally, the British monarchy's soft power continued to hold weight, but its tone had changed. Where once it stood as an unbending symbol of imperial legacy, it now appeared more introspective, even fragile. Diplomatic envoys adjusted their posture accordingly. Instead of ceremonial pomp, meetings became more grounded, discussions more candid. In private, Charles retreated not to total obscurity, but to a quieter life focused on causes he held dear. Environmental non-profits welcomed his return with open arms. With fewer ceremonial obligations, he could devote himself entirely to advocacy and diplomacy in a different form. He penned essays, joined climate think tanks, and became a kind of elder statesman, not cloaked in royal regalia, but in experience and perspective. As the months passed, what initially seemed like a rupture began to feel more like a quiet evolution. Charles's decision had not destroyed the monarchy, it had cracked it open just enough to let in something new. The idea that service did not require permanence, that legacy was not confined to thrones and titles, and that even in a world that reveres tradition, there is room for change. Back at the British Museum, a new exhibit opened, The Short Reign, King Charles III in Retrospect. Visitors moved through galleries that displayed his handwritten speeches, photographs from his coronation, and even the chair he used during his last Privy Council meeting. The exhibit didn't frame his resignation as a scandal or failure, but rather as one of the most pivotal decisions in modern royal history. Younger generations flocked to the exhibition. Some came out of curiosity, others with questions, but many left with a feeling that history had turned a corner, that a man who had waited his whole life for power had chosen to use it not to rule endlessly, but to walk away when he knew it was right. And so, in the twilight of his public life, Charles remained visible, less as a sovereign wielding authority and more as a symbol of a quiet revolution unfolding behind palace walls. He had rewritten the narrative long imposed upon monarchs, not with grandeur and pomp, but with restraint and contemplation, not with the imposition of will, but with the freedom of choice. His abdication, though unprecedented in modern British history, this moment, fraught with uncertainty and hope, marks the end of an era and the beginning of another. It invites reflection on the delicate balance between duty and humanity, tradition and change, symbolism and substance. Charles's journey, from heir apparent to a monarch who chose to step away, raises profound questions about the monarchy's future. What form will the crown take when it is led by a new generation? How will it reconcile the weight of history with the pressing demands of a modern, diverse, and rapidly evolving society? These questions are no longer abstract, they are urgent. The legacy of King Charles III is not simply his environmental crusades or his contested reign, but this moment of profound redefinition. His abdication is a clarion call to future custodians of the crown, a reminder that survival depends on evolution. For King William, now thrust into the spotlight earlier than many anticipated, the path ahead is as daunting as it is full of promise. The prince must navigate a monarchy wrestling with its identity, one foot rooted in centuries-old customs and the other reaching toward an uncertain future. His leadership will be tested not only by tradition's weight, but by the public's growing expectations for authenticity, relevance, and compassion. As Britain stands at this historic crossroads, the question remains, can the monarchy reinvent itself without losing the very essence that has made it a symbol of continuity and stability for over 1,000 years? The answer will unfold in the years to come, but one thing is certain, the reign of King Charles III, though brief and unconventional, has irrevocably changed the monarchy's course, setting in motion a transformation whose full impact has yet to be realized. In the grand global arenas of Geneva, Davos, and Dubai, where world leaders and climate visionaries gather to debate and dictate the future of the planet, one seat has remained conspicuously empty. The subtle choreography that once accompanied the presence of the eco-king, handwritten notes exchanged discreetly, speeches delivered in his distinctive, measured cadence, the very aura of commitment forged over 7 decades has all but vanished. King Charles III, who had for so long championed environmental causes with a blend of passion and paternal concern, has stepped away from the throne, leaving behind a void not just of presence but of principle. His decision to step back was not an abdication in the formal, constitutional sense. The crown remains his by right and title, but in spirit and in action, it was a seismic departure from centuries-old conventions. For the British monarchy, an institution steeped in tradition, duty, and an unspoken expectation of permanence, Charles's retreat represented a rupture, a challenge to the very essence of royal continuity. The shockwaves from this unprecedented choice ripple far beyond the gilded palace walls. In a modest flat in Yorkshire, far from the relentless spotlight of London and the pomp of royal ceremonies, a young child clings to a framed photograph. The image captures a moment of innocent joy, Charles smiling warmly as the child, barely a year old, hands him flowers during a hospital visit. That snapshot, so recent and yet so distant, now seems to encapsulate a world that has irrevocably changed. The gap between that hopeful past and today's uncertainty has widened, leaving many to wrestle with a profound sense of loss. At Westminster Abbey, a cornerstone of British royal heritage, visitors gather curiously around a modest brass plaque commemorating Charles's coronation. Some lean in closely, squinting to read the engraved date. Others whisper questions to their guides, puzzled by the monarch's sudden departure. The guides, schooled in the language of tradition and ceremony, find themselves momentarily adrift, grappling with how to reconcile a reign so brief and a departure so unprecedented. Unlike predecessors who shaped the nation's destiny through long reigns marked by wars, reforms, or diplomacy, Charles's legacy will be defined by his choice to relinquish the throne. This choice shattered the long-standing royal paradigm. For centuries, British sovereigns were expected to serve until death, embodying a steadfastness that provided national stability amid turmoil. Abdications were exceptional and often scandalous, with Queen Victoria's eldest son, Edward VIII's 1936 abdication, serving as the most recent precedent. Charles, having waited longer than any heir in British history and finally ascending to the throne, stunned the world by voluntarily stepping away, ushering in an era of royal evolution fraught with uncertainty. Within Buckingham Palace, the gears of succession turned with unprecedented haste. Preparations for Prince William's coronation were set into motion almost immediately, catching palace officials and royal watchers alike off guard. The ceremonial machinery, usually known for its deliberate pace and adherence to centuries-old protocol, shifted gears rapidly. Yet amid this urgency, there emerged a conscious effort to tone down the grandeur. Sources close to the future king indicated a desire for a coronation marked by humility and reflection rather than ostentation. This was not merely an aesthetic choice, but a symbolic one, acknowledging the delicate political and social climate that surrounded the transition. A lavish ceremony, critics warned, risked overshadowing the fragility of the moment or provoking uncomfortable comparisons with the monarch who had stepped aside so abruptly. Instead, William appeared determined to set a new tone, one that honored tradition without being beholden to it, that recognized the monarchy's need to modernize while respecting its historical gravitas. This moment in history, more than any other, underscores the shifting identity of the British monarchy. No longer can the institution rely solely on its mystique or ceremonial splendor to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing society. It must demonstrate resilience, adaptability, and an understanding of the values held by a diverse and increasingly scrutinous public. William's anticipated reign will therefore be watched closely, not only for the pomp of state, but for how it responds to the evolving expectations of a 21st century Britain. How will the monarchy balance tradition with progress? How will it heal from the unprecedented departure of a monarch who, for so long, seemed destined to reign indefinitely? And most pressingly, how will it sustain public confidence and affection in an era marked by rapid social change and widespread skepticism toward inherited privilege? These questions will define not only William's legacy, but also the future trajectory of the British monarchy itself. The coronation that awaits will not simply be a ceremony, it will be a statement, a deliberate gesture signaling a new chapter, a new era of royal engagement and purpose. As the nation prepares for this historic transition, it does so with a mixture of nostalgia, hope, and cautious anticipation. The pageantry and ritual that have long defined the monarchy remain integral, yet the undercurrents of change are undeniable. In this delicate balancing act between past and future, the crown faces perhaps its most profound test yet: to embody continuity and change, duty and humanity, grandeur and accessibility, all at once. And so, as the empty chair at global summits remains a poignant reminder of what was lost, the gaze of the world turns to the new generation. It watches to see how they will carry the weight of history, how they will forge a path forward, and whether they can reconcile the royal legacy with the demands of modernity. Meanwhile, tucked away from the relentless gaze of the public and the glare of the international press, Highgrove, the verdant sanctuary that King Charles had nurtured over decades, became a place of quiet reflection and unspoken turmoil. Reporters and royal insiders alike described a man caught in a paradox, one foot firmly planted in the pastoral calm of his beloved gardens, the other tethered to the turbulent realities of a changing institution. His once purposeful strides had softened, his eyes often cast inward as if seeking answers among the leaves and blossoms he had tended with a painstaking devotion that few could rival. There was a palpable aura of ambivalence about him. To some, Charles appeared almost relieved, liberated from the relentless demands of a throne that had long felt a burdensome inheritance rather than a privilege. To others, he seemed haunted, a monarch grappling with the ghosts of history and the weight of expectations that had never truly allowed him peace. Yet no official word emerged, no public explanation offered. The silence was profound, the absence of statement itself a statement. A king stepping away from the annals of history before his final chapter had been penned. In the grand tapestry of British history, King Charles's legacy may not be measured by treaties brokered or reforms enacted. Instead, it may be defined by what his unprecedented departure unveiled, the frailty of an institution often assumed invincible. The monarchy, once considered an unyielding pillar of continuity and tradition, now revealed its human core, fragile, mutable, and profoundly vulnerable to the currents of modernity. His choice, a decision as controversial as it was deeply personal, cast a long and contemplative shadow over a monarchy already wrestling with its role in the 21st century. Was this moment the dawn of a monarchy reborn, one resilient enough to bend with the times without breaking, flexible enough to evolve without succumbing to dissolution? Or was it, more ominously, the first tangible sign of decline, the gradual erosion of an institution increasingly alienated from the very people whose lives it was meant to enrich and embody? These questions, laden with historical significance and cultural weight, now rest in the hands of historians, political scholars, royal commentators, and crucially, the British public. For a monarchy's power is not merely derived from lineage or law, it lives and breathes through the tacit consent of those it represents. What then is a monarchy without that essential trust and belief? In the days following Charles's retreat from the throne, social media became a frenetic theatre of debate. Admirers lauded his courage, praising a monarch who prioritized mental well-being and generational renewal over rigid adherence to archaic norms. They saw in his decision a brave acknowledgement that leadership is as much about knowing when to step back as it is about stepping forward. Yet critics were quick to condemn, interpreting his abdication as a failure to uphold the duty he had prepared for his entire life, a retreat that betrayed a weakness unbefitting a king. And yet, through the cacophony of praise and criticism, one unvarnished truth remained. The British crown is, above all, a potent symbol, one steeped in power, permanence, and the promise of continuity. But symbols are only as strong as the faith that sustains them. When a monarch chooses to relinquish their crown, they do more than forsake a title. They compel a nation to confront the very meaning of monarchy itself. Is it merely a relic of tradition, preserved for nostalgia's sake? Or is it an evolving institution capable of reflecting the values, hopes, and complexities of a modern democracy? That answer, inevitably, will not be immediate. It may not emerge fully in the nascent days of King William's reign, nor even during the lifetime of his children. But the question has been posed, boldly and irrevocably, and in posing it, the monarchy has crossed a threshold. As the country, and indeed the world, looks ahead, one cannot help but ponder, what becomes of a monarchy when its most sacred tenet, that of duty until death, is no longer absolute? What changes when kings and queens are no longer bound by the idea of lifelong service, but instead embrace the possibility of choice, balance, and personal well-being? And perhaps most poignantly of all, what does it mean for a nation when it witnesses its sovereign not just as a figurehead or symbol, but as a human being capable of reimagining their own role? This era of transformation demands a redefinition, not only of monarchy, but of the very nature of leadership itself. The British crown, steeped in centuries of ceremony and solemnity, stands at a crossroads between past and future. Whether it emerges resilient and relevant or becomes a vestige of a bygone era hinges on the willingness of its custodians and the public to embrace change without forsaking identity. Charles's unprecedented step back challenges all of us to reconsider what it means to serve and to lead. It invites a conversation about legacy, about adaptability, and about the enduring power of symbols that, while rooted in history, must be allowed to evolve with the times. For in the end, monarchy is not simply about crowns or coronets. It is about the relationship between a people and their chosen figurehead, a delicate dance of expectation, reverence, and responsibility that must be constantly renegotiated. As the sun sets on one reign and rises on another, the story of the British monarchy enters a new chapter, one written not just in royal decrees, but in the hopes and hearts of a nation ready to reimagine its future